everybody. It's Wednesday. Today, I want to say apologies for our delay, but we had a technical problem behind the computer here. But now it's sorted out and we are here live. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for having us today. And today, just Charles and myself. Our dear friend Silvia is sick, and Rodrigo and Nadja there are another commitments. Okay, so good night, Swilly, Belfort, Camille. Good night, my friends. So please talk to us today. Let's make this interactive. Otherwise, you're gonna listen to two guys talking about the speech at the tomb of Allan Kardec. And because we are short of people, we will concentrate our talk today on the Camille Flammarion speech. Okay, we cannot go to others because many people gave the speech at the funeral of Allan Kardec. But today we will concentrate on the Camille Flammarion, which is the most famous one. It's on the Obras Póstumas, posthumous works, and that's it. So, good night, Charles. Ça va bien?
Bonsoir, Stevan. Good evening. Bonsoir à tous. Very happy to be here today. Sorry, we are only two, but you see, no problem. We are still here. We are wishing the best recovery for Silvia, of course. It's now 2 weeks that she's without voice, basically. But okay, that's part of life. From time to time, we need to redo our immunitary defense, natural defense. And if God's wish is she will be back with us, we will be very happy next week. Okay. And yes, Stevan, so today we will talk a little bit about this speech that has been done by Camille Flammarion on the tomb of Allan Kardec. Maybe we can just quickly introduce the Kardec died 31st of March 1869. Okay, so interestingly, he was somehow in a change. He was renting the infrastructure in Passage Sainte-Anne in Paris, where, by the way, it's still today when you visit it, it is still exactly like it was 160 years ago, 155 years ago, and sorry, 154 years ago, because from 69 until 2023 is 154 years. Okay. And there was, how to say, the main room where he had the library, and also where there was a meeting of the Société Parisienne des Études Spirites, the Parisian Society for Spiritist Studies. And on the top, there was a very, 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 very small flat where he was living, at least during the week when he was Passage Sainte-Anne with Amélie, and where he was also receiving all the visitors and guests and so on. And there was also a cellar underneath for probably storing some more voluminous things like books and things like that. And he was the rental of that infrastructure was finishing 31st of March 1869, and he had then the plan for himself to move to Villa Ségur, that was at that time called the Campaign of Paris, the Gardens of Paris.
I think it's to return to there.
Yes. I mean, he bought that property in 1840. And no, sorry, 1840. Yes, 1840, and it was 1849. Apologies. And it was a public sale for people who were in debt and so on. He managed to buy it for 10,000 francs in 1849. And I think in 1869, the value had already been multiplied by 10 or more, because that area were still inside the boundaries of Paris, but how to say, the urbanization did not reach that point yet. So you had a lot of, it was a property with a big garden behind, with a lot of vineyards for and also fruit trees and gardens and flowers and whatever you could wish. So for them, it was really like if it was the campaign, how to say, gardens inside Paris. Of course, in 20 years after, it changed also completely because there was a building of the Eiffel Tower just very close from there. And that area is today one of the most, how to say, valuated in Paris. But so we can see how the things are changing. So he would personally go back to that place, and the library and the meetings of the society, Parisian society were moving to another address, which was Rue de Lille. Rue de Lille. So it is not so far away from Passage Saint, sorry, it's from Villa Ségur. It is a street which is more or less, it still exists today in the vicinity of the Boulevard Saint-Germain for the one who know Paris. So he was still finishing to making the packs for moving partly to one place and partly to another place. And he was attending a representative of a library who ordered some spiritist magazines. So when he was then attending this person, he had this heart attack, which was fulminant. He died standing, as we say, from 1 minute to the other. That was then 31st of March, 1869. And the first como que você diz túmulo em inglês?
Tomb.
Tomb,
Grave or tomb.
or tomb, yes, was not in the Père Lachaise as it is today. The first was in the cimetière Montmartre, okay, which was somehow the closest from the Passage Sainte-Anne where he died. This cemetery does not exist today anymore as it was at that time. It has been, there is only a small part missing, and the part where he was, where was his grave, does not exist anymore. Okay, but and that is then the place where Camille Flammarion made his speech during the funeral. Was a couple of days later. I don't remember exactly the date, but I can check this out for you.
Yeah.
And it is only the year after, 1870, during the first year after his death, that the Spiritists gathered and decided to erect the dolmen, the monument, in the Père Lachaise cemetery. And so his body was then moved from Cimetière Montmartre to the Père Lachaise, to the definitive place. And we found out recently that it was not only Kardec which was moved at that time, but also the mother of Amélie Boudet, who died in 1847, and which was buried at in the same tomb. So both bodies were then moved to the Père Lachaise in 1870. Okay, so that's just to introduce how it happened.
Okay, and let me introduce a little bit to who was Camille Flammarion.
Yes, as well.
Because we don't talk too much about him. And Camille Flammarion, he was a French astronomer, and he worked at the Paris Observatory. He lived from 1842 to 1925. And he met Kardec when he was writing a book, The Plurality of Inhabited Worlds. So this was in November 1861. So he went to the Society of Psychology Studies, which Kardec was a president at that time. And then it was love at first time. So they met. Kardec was about to introduce the Spiritism. That time it was the Spirit's book, and for sure make some sense for Camille, and he became one of the he joined the Society of Psychology Studies as a member. So this is a short briefing about Camille Flammarion and how he was introduced to the Spiritism teachings in 1861. Okay,
So he was
so
19 years old, huh? Not even 20 years, huh?
no,
1842 to 1861. Huh? So he was very young, and he was medium, okay, and so he participated to the sessions of the Parisian Society for Spiritist Study, huh? And he received at the beginning several communications of the spirit of Galileo, huh? That Kardec later on used for writing the Genesis, this part of the Genesis of the solar system and so on, of the moon, of the earth, the different hypotheses and so on, was then done in collaboration with Camille Flammarion, and also using these communications that Camille Flammarion received during the first years of contact. It was maybe already some in 1861, and then the remaining one in the following years. And indeed, so Camille Flammarion he started his career as an astronomer. At the end, he was extremely famous, not only in France, but I think also worldwide, thanks to his studies. And as you told, Stevan, he was, how to say, manager of the observatory in Juvisy in Paris, with a big telescope for coordinating the Astronomy Society and the researchers in France. Wrote several books. So at the end of the life, he wrote several books where he was, how to say, the biggest spiritist books of Camille Flammarion have been written in the years already in the 20th century. The first book were, for instance, about the plurality of the inhabited world, but also about God, about the conditions for living in these different planets and so on. So and really, the theory he advanced at that time and that Kardec reproduced in the Genesis was quite advanced for that epoch. And today, the one which is presented by Kardec in the Genesis is recognized as being the admitted one by the science nowadays. So it's quite remarkable to see how Camille Flammarion could help in this way, for really giving a lot of scientific credibility to this book of Genesis of Allan Kardec.
Mm-hmm. And one of the why his speech was famous is it's because he was again young and he affirmed that Spiritism is not a religion, it's a science. So when he said this, like a young person, well recognized scientist saying Spiritism is not a religion, it is a science. That's why one of the reasons his speech was um, well known and became famous. So let's go to the speech itself and put it here. So let me read you, Charles, the first paragraph, just to see how he introduced. And in the first paragraph, you kind of observe that he was very close to Kardec. And he started saying, it is under the blow of the deep pain caused by the premature departure of the venerable founder of the Spiritism teachings that we approach our task, simple and easy for his wise and experienced hands, but whose weight and gravity would overwhelm us if we did not count on the effective cooperation of the good spirits and the indulgence of our readers. So clearly here we can see what, I don't know, perhaps everybody knows. We don't have someone saying, oh, Kardec wrote. No, Kardec was one of the pieces who brought to us the Gospel according to Spiritism, all the five books. And here, Camille, he emphasized that Kardec was the right person, experienced person at the right time, but nevertheless, all this happened with the help of the spirits and the methodology Kardec used to write those books. What was the methodology? He asked many questions, different spirit centers around the world. He collect the answers. He will see the connections. So Camille, thankful all those who contribute directly or indirectly to compose these works from Spiritism.
Yes, indeed. And of course, Camille Flammarion, from his education, was more oriented to the scientific aspect of Spiritism. And in another place of this speech, that he's qualifying Kardec, that Kardec is what we could call in French, le bon sens incarné. So it is the incarnated common sense. So Camille Flammarion was really in big admiration about the way of reasoning of Kardec, making this clear reasoning that we can see in all his books of Allan Kardec, and that really calls the attention of Flammarion. On top of course, all these criteria that Kardec followed, and that Flammarion was also deeply recognizing the validity. He who was this big scientist. And one can even add on top of this that this methodology that has been used by Kardec, this universal control of the teaching of the spirits, was really, how to say, something outstanding, because at that time, we had Descartes, of course, who came with this after the Greek philosophers, of course, making a concept of the methodology of science. We had also Auguste Comte with the positivism in France, also developing a lot the scientific method. And Kardec was, of course, following all those concepts, but he also did anticipate some others that came that were defined only later on by Imre Lakatos, for instance, or even more recently in the 20th century by Thomas Kuhn, with some criteria like the falsifiability, admitting that a scientific theory is valid only as so far as nobody is proving that it is false. So giving a clear idea that science is changing and evolving and progressing and improving with the time. And Thomas Kuhn, he insisted in his how to say talking about scientific revolutions, giving the example that the Newtonian theory was valid until Einstein came in 1905 with the relativity theory, where he proved Newton is correct within certain limits, but when we go out of these limits, we need to take in account some other factors that he introduced in his relativity theory. So that is typically an example of this scientific revolution. And Kardec, when you read, for instance, the Genesis, the first chapter, which is the character of the Spiritist revelation, he is also introducing this concept of progressivity of the Spiritist teachings by clearly stating nothing is cast in concrete. If someone, science comes and proves that Spiritism is wrong in a certain point, Spiritism will immediately adapt and change that point.
Mm-hmm.
So it did not happen so far for all the fundamental basis of the Spiritism, like we have a soul, the soul survives after the death, it reincarnates, and so on. It did not happen for these principal basic points of the Spiritism. Nevertheless, Kardec was applying that criteria that got conceptualized only later on by the scientists which were specialized in epistemology.
Yeah. Camille, I'm putting here a link for this speech. It is in Portuguese because I couldn't find this in English, but you can translate, you can use the Google Translator in order to help you. And also, Charles, Camille put it here. Interestingly enough, I had a conversation with ChatGPT, and it admitted that the science is not complete without encompassing the known material.
Absolutely. This is, ChatGPT is quite wise in this aspect, because Camille Flammarion also in the speech, he recognizes the courage and the opportunity and also the way he did it of Kardec for introducing the scientific methodology for investigating non-material aspects. So questions like the soul, the spirit, the perispirit, the mediumship, and so on. And it is really, how to say, a revolution as well, somehow, that Kardec brought, and that still today is not yet understood. Yet, you are talking about ChatGPT, and indeed, ChatGPT is correct, because nowadays, the I would say mainstream science is based still on the materialistic paradigm. In other ways, only the matter that we can, the tangible matter, the matters that follow the law of physics as they are known today, including the relativity law from Einstein, also the quantum physics and all the others. It is only this that exists in the universe, nothing else. So it's just a statement, but it is not proved nowhere. And on the opposite, that was what Kardec inaugurated and was clearly recognized by Flammarion in his speech. There is a book recently published, The Science of Life After Death, that is showing exactly what ChatGPT answered here. So there is now a kind of convergence of evidences, that there is, how to say, not only the material things are existing in the universe, but there are also some non-material beings like the spirit, like the perispirit, some other forms of matter that are not limited by the speed of light and so on. And there is really a convergence of proofs in this way. For instance, EMI, mediumship, recording of past lives, mediumship with proofs, evidences of the identity of the communicating spirits, and so on. And in the same book, Science of Life After Death, Umberto Schubert Coelho, which is a philosopher of science, is explaining exactly what ChatGPT answered, that as soon as there is a convergence of evidences for something, the correct scientific behavior is to investigate it, and not simply, oh, that's not my business, or to reject it, or it's contradicting the theory I believe in, so let's keep this aside. All these are not correct scientific behaviors, but it's unfortunately what we are seeing still today in the world. And ChatGPT is fully correct in saying that science is not complete without encompassing the non-material, which is more and more, which is gathering more and more evidences nowadays. And that's one of the main subjects why Flammarion had such admiration for Allan Kardec, and why he was stating this very clearly in his speech.
Yeah, it's like I like this what he wrote here. It is one, two, three. It's in the third paragraph, Charles. And
From the beginning?
From the beginning.
Yes.
Incisive, concisive, profound. He knew how to please and make himself understood in a language that was both simple and elevated, as far from the familiar style as from the obscurities of metaphysics. It is
exactly,
because we need. Kardec was able to explain difficult things like we today. How many people give a talk here to explain something, and sometimes nobody understands. It's still difficult to understand it. And Kardec was able in 19th century talk about it with such natural way.
And this is what we still can see, and it touched me also the first time I read the Kardec's book. The language is extremely clear, and he's not using, when you go to you listen today to a scientist, or even not a scientist, someone who is specialized in a given area, he will use a lot of dedicated words of that matter, or of that trade, and if you are not if you don't know all the specific vocabulary of a given area, you are immediately lost when you read something, And what did Kardec do in the Spirit's book? He was clearly defining in the introduction, at the really beginning of the book, these are the words that I'm introducing, new words like spiritist, spiritism, and so on. And this is, for instance, in the case of soul, when I talk about the soul, this is exactly what I understand when I'm using this word. So that was really one of the big quality recognized by Camille Flammarion, of the clarity, and also of the language of Allan Kardec, and also clear, but also simple.
And also, this is, let me check it here, Charlie. So if this is what
you go to two paragraphs later on, he was alone, but we would call him Legion.
Yeah. Yeah.
And indeed, when he started in 1855, as we explained it also in a previous life, all the people were motivated by curiosity and so on. And he was really one of the only one at that time. Camille Flammarion is even saying alone, really trying to go to the point and understanding what's happening in a serious way. So he how to say, put aside immediately the curiosity, and he saw by intuition, of course, because he came for this. That was his mission in this life. He saw immediately that behind this phenomenon of turning or dancing table, questions that got some answers through the table, he saw immediately there is something extremely profound behind this, and the explanation that he was looking for his whole life. And so he did not lose his time like we see it. Unfortunately, we saw it a lot of times later on in demonstrating and demonstrating and demonstrating again that the table is really moving and so on. He just went to the essence of the phenomenon, taking the content of it, which is what are the spirits saying, what are they teaching, and built the spirits book, going immediately to the consequences, not staying onto the phenomenon, but going to see, to encompass the whole, all the aspects behind this phenomenon, and demonstrating also the big consistency between inside the spiritist body of knowledge and the spiritist philosophy. And that is also what Camille Flammarion is here mentioning in his speech.
And Charles, in the sixth paragraph, Camarion said, he had written these words on his flag: work, solidarity, tolerance. Let us be like him, indefatigable. Let us be according to his wishes, tolerant and supportive. And let us not be afraid to follow his example by putting back into his hands 20 times the principles still discussed.
Exactly.
Yeah, remember last week when we are talking about what was the Kardec's advice for those who were against the Spiritism, for those who are persecuted the Spiritism. Kardec say, don't say not, silence. But he was Kardec, so he can say that because he was tolerant, he was solidarity, he worked a lot, he was an example of what he he was inspired to write in those works. So he had a life. He was a good man. Now you have it in the Gospel according to Spiritism, the chapter for what was a good man.
Yes,
Kardec was an example of that.
indeed. So it was not do what I say, but don't do what I do. So
Yeah.
Kardec was exactly the opposite of this. And here, Camille Flammarion is also recognizing not only the scientific aspect of the spiritist body of knowledge that Kardec produced in his mission. He is also touching to the ethical and the moral consequences, solidarity and tolerance. So these are really the values that we still miss a lot here on the earth. If there would be tolerance towards the people who are thinking differently than us, if there would be solidarity, so in order to, like it's happening nowadays in France with this question of age of retirement, it's really a battle, a fight. There is no solidarity, there is no tolerance. It's a fight, and for such things, where, as we say in French, in our life, sometimes we have to tighten a little bit more our belt. So to make some sacrifices in order to save something for the good of the community. So it's a kind of abnegation. We give something from our own interest in order to save the overall interest of everyone. And this is clearly still missing a lot. Instead of sitting together, everyone is fighting for his position, and there is no real dialogue. And without dialogue, we cannot solve this type of unpopular questions that, unfortunately, from time to time are necessary. And Kardec really work the first. We are still discovering in all these letters and all these documents that appeared 5 years ago. There is one letter that he wrote to a doctor admitting that he was working 18 hours per day and sometimes even a little bit more. So, and that's why in beginning of 1865, for instance, he almost died. And he was something like more than 1 month, completely stopped, couldn't do anything anymore. Otherwise, his heart would have collapsed in 1865. And he had still to publish the 2 last books, the Heaven and Hell, that came in that same year, and the Genesis that came in 1868.
Yeah.
And here as well, Camille Flammarion was really admiring these qualities of Kardec.
Yeah, and Camille, he said, yeah, absolutely agree. The language used in the codification is simple and logic is undeniable. Yeah, agreed. And let me see which
I
paragraph.
think Camille is reading the books in Polish, correct, Camille? Or maybe in English?
Yeah, he
Because
said
indeed, the Polish translation done by Konrad Jerzak
Camille
is
said
quite good.
he understands Portuguese. So
Portuguese, okay.
yeah,
The Portuguese translations are also very good.
yeah. Let me. I like this. Charles, I think this is so the 6th, the 7th, 13th paragraph. Born in the Catholic religion, but a student in a Protestant country, the acts of intolerance he had to suffer in this regard made him, in good time, conceive the idea of a religious reform, on which he worked in silence for many years, with the thought of arriving at the unification of beliefs, but he lacked the indispensable element for the solution of this great problem.
Just read the next one, please.
Spiritism came later to give him and give a special direction to his work.
So indeed, that was also programmed by the spirituality, of course. France was Catholic at that moment, and particularly the region where he grew up in Bourg-en-Bresse. He's born in Lyon, that's correct, but he grew up in Bourg-en-Bresse, and it was 100% Catholic, nothing else. But when he went to study in Yverdon, Switzerland was already more Protestant at that time. And amongst the students in Yverdon, he had also Russian people, so which were more from the Orthodox religion. He also had some Jewish colleagues. He had some Anglo-Saxonic colleagues, and that gave him really this lateral view. He was really heavily open-minded in terms of religion, and so it was a hurt from him to see this fight and this misunderstanding, because as he knew he had contact with several of them, he was already seeing, but all of them agree on the main principles. The only differences between those religions is one is praying like that, the other one is praying like that. One is has a white suit, the other one has a black suit, and so on. So only stuff that have been introduced later on by humankind, but which did not came neither from Jesus nor from Mohammed or whoever else, you know. And Kardec was perfectly aware of all this, and indeed, the Spiritist body of knowledge brought this understanding. And I think the first realization in this way from Allan Kardec is the book third of the Spirit's book, which is about the moral laws. That was really, he was showing on all these moral laws, the one who does not agree with this, okay, he must come and explain. Maybe he has something better, but so far, this is what we can find in all the principles of the basic principles of the religions. And later on, of course, he wrote the Gospel according to Spiritism. That was then looking more carefully to the teachings of Jesus and comparing it with all what the Spirit were saying, bringing back to the right interpretation of all these teachings. But this book, the Gospel according to Spiritism, there could be equivalent book like the Vedas according to Spiritism, the Buddhism according to Spiritism, or the Quran according to Spiritism, exactly in the same way, because all these basic moral teachings are identical in all the different religions around the world. And that was also one of Kardec's concerns, as Camille Flammarion is explaining him. You must know also that Camille Flammarion was very close to Kardec, so he got invited a lot of times in the weekends in Villa Ségur, where it was a little bit more informal, the exchanges, and Kardec explaining all these items that Flammarion is remembering in his speech. And the date I found it was the 2nd of April. So he died 31st of March, and the funeral was 2nd of April, 1869.
And Charles, just conscious about time here, I will put a big jump. After the introductions of the Kardec, he said, Camille said, instead of the principle, outside the church there is no salvation, which entertains the division and animosity between the different sects, and which caused so much blood to be shed, Spiritism has its maxim. Outside charity, there is no salvation. That is equally between men before God. Tolerance, freedom of conscience, and mutual benevolence.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Outstanding, isn't it?
it is
And Kardec,
amazing.
he could have said, out of Spiritism there is no salvation. But he did not state that. He stated, out of charity there is no salvation. Okay? So the atheist or Buddhist or whoever doing charity is on the right track. And the Spiritist doing nothing is less worse than an atheist guy doing charity. It's out of charity that there is no salvation. So these are parts of these diamonds that Kardec brought to us, clearly. And the next paragraph is also very interesting.
It is wonderful. I was saying, well, let me read this.
Go on.
In place of the blind faith that annuls freedom of thought, he says, there is no unbreakable faith, but that which can look reason face to face in all the ages of mankind.
Exactly.
Faith needs a foundation, and that foundation is the perfect understanding of what one must believe. To believe it is not enough to see, it is necessary, above all, to understand. My gosh. Blind faith is no longer of this century. Well, it is precisely the dogma of blind faith that makes the greatest number of unbelievers today, because it wants to impose itself and requires the addition of one of the most precious faculties of man, reasoning and free will.
It's difficult to comment something like this.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's typically what we heteronomy. You must believe it because it's written or because the Pope has said it. Now, here in Spiritism, Kardec he, opened a new era. Go, read, study, understand, and then you believe if you want to. You still have, even if understanding, you still have the free will, and you are free not to believe in it, even if you understand it. But he never asked anyone to believe something before the person was able to understanding. Albeit, this is also existing. Some people have, how to say, a kind of a natural faith, and they are believing things even without understanding. A lot of people, for instance, how to say, believe he's telling a lot of times
Yeah,
a lot of people say no, I will believe it when I see it. And
exactly.
I have seen this, I have experienced this several times.
Me too. Me
People
too.
who saw the best authentic phenomenon and still are as doubtful after having seen than before. And why? Because they did not understand. And in my case, it was a little bit the opposite. Of course, when I started, I saw some phenomena which were quite convincing, that's true. But then, when I read the books, I saw a lot of things being described in the books that I never could see. For instance, the first turning table I could see was only 10 years after I read the Spirit's book. But I was clearly believing because when you see how it's written, the number of people talking about that and so on, you cannot deny it. All these people did not combine together. God know how, in order to tell exactly the same thing. There are so many testimonies, so many evidences that at the end you say, okay, that makes sense. And as you understood it, you can believe in it, even if you did not never see it.
Yeah,
By the way, I also never saw a photon or an electron, and yet I believe that the photons and electrons are existing. It's the same. And but later on, I saw a table moving in the same conditions that Kardec could see, so without any tricks, without any rope, any lever or whatsoever. And but I did. It was not necessary for me to see it in order to believe it.
and see, Marco wrote to us this sentence: "Our of church doesn't have salvation."
There is no salvation. Yes.
Uh, Catholic, so Kardec took this one for him, but changed it. Charlie Rose doesn't
Yes.
have
So
salvation.
he made a kind of a paraphrase, I think.
Yes,
Huh?
yes.
Out of the church, no salvation. This is what you heard in the Catholic Church. We believe in the Roman Catholic Church, blah 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 blah. And you go to Jehovah Witness, they say the same. Only the witness of Jehovah will be saved at the end. All the other will be, God knows what will happen with them. Uh, and you see here, he took that one, which was, how to say, a kind of a caricature, and made out of it something extremely profound. Without charity, there is no salvation. It's incredible,
Mhm.
isn't it? Uh, and also this change of blind faith. A lot of disbelievers as well, but because of course more and more people want to understand. More and more people are not satisfied just by statements of the Pope or of whoever. They ask questions. They would like to understand. They'd like to got answers. And at a given point in time, the answer is it's written like this, so you must believe it. And then poof, you make an unbeliever if you behave like that. And
Yeah,
Kardec was doing exactly the opposite. Here are all the explanations. Now it's up to you to believe or not to believe.
beautiful, beautiful. Uh, Let me go.
It's quite long, the speech,
Yeah,
so we cannot go to all the points. We just have taking some cherries and encouraging every one of you. I can give you it's but in French as well. So I found an original. It was published in 1869. The discourse. And then, as I told, the year after, they made the inauguration, the first anniversary, the dolmen in the Père Lachaise cemetery. And here as well, you see it's a whole booklet, and you have something like 10 or more speeches that were given at that opportunity. And since that date, every year there was a commemoration, and it was a kind of I'm gathering right now all the description I found about this commemoration, because it's interesting to see. At the beginning, it was some tens of people, and then it was already hundreds and hundred and some, and then some hundreds. At a given point in time, it was even 500 or 600 people gathered. Then it fall down a little bit, then came up. Excellent, how to say, indicator of the popularity of Spiritism along the time. It was a little bit lost in the last periods, but in the French Spiritist Federation, we took it back, at least before the COVID. So there was some interruption due to the COVID. But still, we will. This year also, there was a commemoration not in front of the monument. So every year we do something homenageating the anniversary of the death of Allan Kardec.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
And there is also one statement somewhere from Camille Flammarion, who was, how to say, a little bit wrong. Spiritism will be scientific or will not be. It's also something that Camille Flammarion stated. And in fact, Camille Flammarion's approach of Spiritism, albeit he understood the religious question and also these ethical consequences and philosophical consequences, he was really of the opinion that Spiritism should continue like Kardec inaugurated, by applying a scientific methodology in the investigation. So this, particularly after Kardec's disincarnation, got a little bit lost, and that was one of the reason why Camille Flammarion did not accept to become the president of the Society of Spiritist Researchers after Kardec's death, because the trend of some of the participants, or majority of them, was more to go to the religious aspect, or the, how
Yes.
to say, social assistance and so on, and to give up a little bit about the scientific methodology. And our opinion today is that we really should combine all of them. So keep the scientific methodology without stopping the social assistance and spiritual assistance, all these assistance activities that Spiritist movement is doing.
Yes. Okay. So, Charles, we have just 3 minutes. It was quicker than I thought, but let me finish with the last sentence of the speech, the last paragraph. Let me read the last paragraph. A powerful individuality constituted the work. He was the guide and the light of all. The work on earth will have the place of the Indian.
Of the individual.
The individual, yeah, of the individual. It will no longer gather around Allan Kardec. It will gather around Spiritism as it constituted. And by his advice, under his influence, we will advance in the right steps towards the happy phases promised to regenerated humanity.
Exactly.
So we will be there someday.
Mm,
After some incarnations, probably gonna reach there.
mm.
Yeah. So
And what is also remarkable with Kardec is he made all what he could not to have uh, how to say to homenageated his person first. He always, when the people were, for instance, during his speeches or his travels, journeys, and as we told a little bit, 1862 in the last week and the week before, huh? Every time the people were homenageating him, he was saying, I understand that you are homenageating the spiritist body of knowledge that were brought by the spirits, that I was simply the instrument. So when you're homenageating myself, you are in fact homenageating spiritist teachings. So he had always this attitude of humility and avoiding having idolatry and all these things, that is
yes.
generally unavoidable in such conditions.
Okay. Okay. So let me put it here. Our announcements. Thank you, Marco. Marco saying thank you for sharing this. Yes, it was not easy, but we will probably we'll do another one with other speeches. So let's see what we can do. Let me share my screen and let's go to our announcements here. Okay, next Wednesday, 12th of April, we go to the purpose of incarnation according to Spiritism. 9 p.m. UK and Ireland time. For those brothers and sisters who like spiritist psychology, please contact our friend Fabrício Assunção in Bournemouth Spiritist Society. He will give you more details about it. And since Monday, we start the World Spiritist Month. In order to get more details, I ask you to go to this web page, feal.com.br/mes spirita. You will have the English part, or French, or Spanish, or Esperanto. And every single day, we will have someone from around the world talking about spiritism.
So Chile and Colombia are already released, huh? And today will be released the third one. Let me just try to see which one it is. You can have the program on this website, huh? Go on, I will tell you who it is today.
Okay, let me see here. Sveal. Okay. Okay, today.
Today will be El Salvador. Okay.
Yeah,
Tomorrow, Ecuador. 7th of April, it will be Spain. 8th of April, it will be France. Always on a different subject. Chile was about divorce. Colombia was about corruption. Ecuador will be about God. Spain will be about ambient and end of the world. All the subjects which are very actual.
yeah, and this goes up to 14th of April.
Yes. So, but the full program will be until 30th of April, because there are
Perfect.
28 countries.
Yes, yes, yes.
30th of April, it will be South Africa.
Yeah. Good. Good, good, good. So let's keep going here. Um, every Saturday, 10:30 a.m., Charles Munir and Guilherme, they do the Mediums book study. So please join them every Saturday, 10:30 a.m. Every Monday, our friend Ebon in Paris, she give a study about the book Astro City in Solar, 8 p.m. UK time. And every other Tuesday, Rafael Caldas and Faye Waddington, they have conversations on mediumship. And this is it. This is it from us today. Once again, Charles, merci. Merci beaucoup. My friends, thank you very
Thanks
much
to
for your
you.
time. Camille, Marcos, thank you for interacting with us. Make this more a dialogue than a speech. Thank you very much. And I'll see you. We will see you next Wednesday, 9 p.m. Thank you.